Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook?
So the red light is rolling, and I'm hoping it's going to behave itself, because sometimes the red light rolls and turns itself off again. But the red light is rolling, and we are joined today. Well, what fantastic Fleet Geeks we've got lined up today. We're going to be talking about the DVS, Direct Vision Standard Consultation for 2024, which is only next year, guys. So today I've got Mr. Mike with me.
Hello, how you doing? All right, good. And we're all in person today as well.
Yeah, we're all here. We're in the Lloyd room in Flagship HQ, which is bright. Well, I'm looking at a bright yellow wall with a picture of Jim Carrey on it. But we're also joined, we've got a special guest. We've got James today, James Adcroft. James, are you able to just introduce yourself for the listeners, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Pete. Hi, Mike. Thanks for inviting me along. My name's James. We've spoken before, so kind of worked with you guys on a few things in the past. I'm a compliance manager for a transport operator in the UK. Here today, to answer some questions about DVS and worth noting that not on behalf of my employer. I'm here today with my own views and to discuss transport with you.
Appreciate that, James. James, we really appreciate you coming to visit us. Last night, we're recording this. Last night we held our first transport briefing at Flagship HQ, which was a free event. We had a few listeners of the podcast, so thank you to those who came along, and keep an eye out for June the 22nd. June the 22nd, I think
is the 22nd.
Yeah. Which is the next one,
event.
Which is very, very exciting. And I was dead chuffed. I went home last night feeling super proud of what we'd achieved with the briefing there. So yeah, absolutely spot on. I really, really enjoyed that. So what did you reckon, Mike?
No, it's a great event, and so you should, Pete, because these things take a bit of bravery, don't they? It's like you always imagine as a kid having a birthday party and like waiting for people to turn up, and nobody turns up. But we had a great turnout, and it was a great event. So yeah, but well done, and congratulations, because I've been to many briefings and events run by, so we say, much larger organisations where you've it's not been anywhere near as buzzy as that, or as
so I must admit, I actually had that fear of rejection yesterday. So as a person who's grown up, my birthday is the 3rd of January.
Yeah.
Make sure you remember, everyone, because I expect a card. But the 3rd of January, there couldn't be a worse day to have a birthday, right? Because it's right after Christmas and New Year. And I'm sure that I've had some poorly turned out birthday parties before, so I've got this like fear of rejection from when I was a kid.
Absolutely.
So I was very nervous in the build up to yesterday, but anyway, it's done now, and I'm dead chuffed with how it went, and I'm looking forward to doing some more. And there were some great learnings for us from what happened. So as with anything, we'll continue to improve those, and we're looking forward to getting some feedback of how we can shape future ones too. So if you were there, please do make sure you fill out the feedback forms to help shape future ones. But if you weren't there, please do give us a shout, drop us an email, and tell us what you'd want to hear from a transport briefing, because we're going to look at shaping what's in the next one. Anyway, I waffle on, and we're here to talk about the 2024 consultation for Direct Vision Standard. James, if you don't mind just sharing with us, just sort of take us back. What is the Direct Vision Standard? How did it come about, and what's the background?
Yeah, sure. Let me give you certainly the headlines briefly. So, we're going back a long time now. 2016 was the time that the Mayor announced his plans for a Direct Vision Standard all off the
And
bat.
who was the Mayor at the time? Was it Boris?
I think it was Sadiq. Was it? Or was it? Yes, I think it was one of his first.
It's always been one of Sadiq's policies, all based around his Vision Zero objective, which is to reduce. Which is to eliminate deaths and serious injuries on London roads. Mm-hmm. So it was part of that. And in 2016, he started talking about the Direct Vision Standard, and that took some time in terms of their research and their proposals, consultations, discussions with industry and other stakeholders, until eventually in kind of 2017 to 19, we have a consultation period. An official consultation went out, and it was launched in 2019. there was a little delay then, as with everything in our lives. COVID caused a delay, and enforcement of Direct Vision Standard actually started in March of 2021.
Right, okay.
And so that's the administrative bit.
It's enforced by cameras?
It is enforced by the camera network,
Yeah.
but also some on-road enforcement as well.
Okay,
because
right.
the camera can't pick up
Everything? No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
So there's some feet on the ground as well.
And police, well, I guess, is the...
Good question.
The
I'm not too sure. I don't think so. I think more likely to be
DVSA.
enforcement or TFL enforcement.
Oh, TFL enforcement, yeah.
I was going to say that they come via an FPN from the TFL. They're TFL-headed FPNs
Right,
that come and
okay.
arrive, yeah.
So that's the kind of the admin bit, I guess, in terms of what did that look like for operators. Of course, was that in summary, it meant that vehicles over 12 tonnes going into the Greater London area, so that area, all of the, whatever it is, 32, 33 London boroughs, easiest way to think about it, roughly within the M25.
Yeah.
If you're over 12 tonnes, you'd to be compliant. Compliance was achieved in one of two ways. One is that your vehicle, your over 12 tonne vehicle, met the required safety standard, and that was achieved by all vehicles receiving a star rating. So at manufacture, a vehicle is given a star rating. You can't change that star rating.
Okay,
it's given a star rating, and that's what it is. And the greater the star rating, then the better direct vision a vehicle had. So
so the more stars, the better it is. Yeah,
you got it, exactly
right, superb.
Right. And in the and off the back of the first consultation and the first implementation, a vehicle that was 0 stars needed something more than just I'm 1 star or above so I can come into the city. You need to have there was a safety scheme, and you had to install some equipment. You had to meet some standards, like things like underarm protection, some decals on, some sensors. You had to facilitate some safety protocols so that you improved your safety.
A range of cameras and audible warnings and bits and pieces,
exactly,
wasn't it?
Right. Yeah.
About £1,000 worth of kit. About
Is it?
£1,000.
It was an investment from operators. Absolutely.
Per vehicle. Yeah.
So with whichever one of those two routes you had to take, you then had to apply for a safety permit. So regardless of whether you were compliant automatically because of the star rating of your vehicle, or whether you had to do some work in terms of a safety system, you then had to apply for a safety permit. And once you applied, then there you go, like Mike says, the ANPR system works and everything else. So that was the premise originally. But really key to this initial premise, this initial launch, was that there would be a review in 2024, or there would be a change in 2024, because it was advertised, it was described as a progressive safe system. So it wasn't going to stand still. As technology moved on, TfL would have an expectation that operators moved on as well. And that's where we are now. So we're now in 2023, a year before the next phase,
step,
if you will. Exactly right. So TfL have just gone into consultation. So there's a live consultation, kicked off middle of February, ends on the 3rd of April, which describes their proposals. And I've got to be really clear, we're in consultation at the moment. Nothing's set in stone,
nothing's
yet.
certain.
But that describes what this progressive safe system looks like, and what our operators are going to have to do.
Can I just ask a question which I think is certainly on the edge, on the tip of my tongue, and that is, do we know how much notice an operator would be likely to get from the decision of the consultation to implementation? Do we know like sort of what that timescale is going to be? Because I know it was certainly a phased entry in the outset, wasn't it? In that it was due to come in a certain I can't remember the exact dates, which is a bit frustrating because I was very close to it at the time. But I think it was due to come in September. Was it 20? What year were we talking originally? Was it 2019? September 2019, and then it ended up being like January, February time. It was all getting fitted and needed to be in by March. And there was sort of a bit of a delay, but people had some notice that this was coming and obviously hadn't really done anything about it. So this time there's going to be less ignorance towards it, of course, because people are already prepared. But I wondered if there was going to be maybe a 6 month, 12 month, because it's some investment for operators, isn't it?
To be fair to TfL, that's why they're consulting now, in my view. So consultation ends on the 3rd of April. TfL are hoping to get out the results of that by the middle of the year, by June, middle of the year. Now, that will then give operators until October 2024 to implement the changes.
So that's a chunk of time. That's over a year, nearly 18 months. So... fantastic. Okay, and is there any? Do we have any idea of what equipment they're looking for? Because I certainly heard a horror story. Obviously, this is just hearsay. I attended the I'm forgetting their name at the moment. Are they National Highways?
Yes.
Highways England.
Yeah,
National Highways. I attended the recent conference at the Space Centre in Leicester, which was fantastic. Actually, James, you were there as well. But I remember speaking or overhearing one of the camera providers saying, I don't think we even do a camera that is of the specification needed or is being discussed in the new DVS standard. Is that... is there any indication of what that system's going to look like? Because I know, in my understanding, the existing kit is fairly strong as long as it's all working. So any idea of what sort of things we might be looking at?
Yeah, no doubt, because it's there in the consultation. So obviously, one of the things we can do, and I'll talk about a couple of things, is understand what it is that TfL are consulting on, and their proposals, if you will. To be fair, in terms of the manufacturers of the safety kit, until the consultation ends, they have really nothing to hang their hat on. They could start to develop technology that fits.
It might not keep up with it.
But in fairness to them, until we have a definitive decision on what the requirement is, the technology manufacturers don't have anything to go on. That's not to say that they can't start and aren't already developing the technologies, but that'll be up to them. Yeah, we can only go off what's in the consultation at the moment. So in terms of the consultation, let me talk about a couple of things that are changing. So a few of the changes are related to the language used, fairly simple but nevertheless very meaningful. And this is this familiar change that we see when we talk about guidance and legislation. That is the change from should to must. And there's going to be some of those languages changes. There are some of those language changes talked about in the consultation. So, for example, the existing talk of a camera monitoring system should completely eliminate blind spots at the near side. The proposal is that will become must completely eliminate. It's a nuance, but nevertheless does make
very
a
important in our world.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, absolutely, it is. So there'll be a couple of examples of those on rigid vehicles. It currently says sensors should ensure coverage down the near side, and I think the proposal is that will again become a must. Very key and important as we start to talk about technology is the change from passive sensors on the vehicle to active sensors. So this rhetoric about sensors should not activate in response to things like road furniture,
which they do.
Furniture on the pavement. That it's being proposed that will change to must not activate.
Yes.
Now that's key, because that means that if you've got a vehicle where you've installed passive sensors, that may be a problem, because the consultation is talking about they have to be active sensors. And there's your first example of where this could constitute an investment from an operator if it should that element of the consultation come to fruition, and that's what the rule becomes, then that might constitute an investment for operators. What that looks like, again, we don't know at the moment. There's I hear that there are technology manufacturers out there who suggest there could be some sort of upgrade,
like a firmware or something.
But I've got to be really clear. I'm being speculative there, because
Yeah,
I
of course.
haven't seen that definitively, and I've spoken to another manufacturer who said, actually, no, we think it's a refit.
Yeah.
And it'll be important as the consultation ends that operators really start to understand that, because that will affect your investment, no doubt.
Wow.
Hello, it's Shani from Flagship Partners. We are really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. If you need expert advice or training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We are really excited to announce the launch of our Transport Manager Academy. With expert development for fleet leaders, we offer fully accredited initial Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher, and operator license awareness training, as well as mentoring, support, and professional development beyond the qualification. Our vision is to develop elite fleet professionals.
So the other big change in terms of technology is that the consultation talks about a front sensor system, so a moving off information system.
Yeah, that's quite important.
That's
yeah.
new, that's different,
That's new.
and it talks about, and that this is where you have a sensor that looks at, that covers that area immediately in front of the cab. So we all know, perhaps a metre back, a metre away from the cab, a driver can see, but immediately in front you can't. Mm-hmm. And so the consultation talks about vehicles must have a moving off information system that activates, on a proximity information signal detecting pedestrians and cyclists right in front of the vehicle.
Of course, yeah.
And again, really important aspect that, because that, should the consultation result in that becoming what's required, the requirements, there may be an investment for operators.
That's interesting, that, because that technology is, my car's certainly got it. Mm-hmm. If I'm at a set of traffic lights and somebody walks in front of my car, and I can perfectly well see them because they're stood right in front of me, but we get a beep go off in the so the technology must exist, and it's fairly straight. And that is a problem, I know, particularly in towns and cities. But I think the statistics, which I'm not going to try to quote because I can't remember them off the top of my head, but the statistics for pedestrians involved with HGVs in London outweigh the cyclists. And most of that is moving off.
Sure.
Because, that's vulnerable people cross the road, or anybody can cross the road, but, it's generally speaking vulnerable people that will cross the road maybe more slowly in front of a heavy goods vehicle, and they're not realise they're there. And I know there's a lot of tragic incidents involving pedestrians in London. So it's a really good move, that.
Yeah, interesting. And again, that sensor will need to be active.
Rather than passive,
as you would expect.
So it picks up a moving person rather than a car in front.
I was going to say,
exactly right.
I think and I'm speculating because I don't know, but just based on conversations I've had before, I think the big challenge is going to be this element of eliminating the road furniture. I think the differentiating between people and barriers and traffic lights and all of the different road furniture. I believe that's probably technically the biggest challenge, but I'm not 100% on that. But I think that will be ultimately the proximity sensors are quite straightforward, aren't they? From a technical point of view, they're emitting I think it's waves. They're emitting waves and then they're getting waves back, and then that is how the sort of sensors work in that sense. But it's, that adds some level of intelligence to the system to know. Yeah, there's this level of intelligence to know, actually, is that a vulnerable road user, or is that a piece of...
Is that, car in front, or a lorry in front?
No, exactly.
And absolutely right. Yeah. This is why I think it's important that as we see the consultation conclude and we know where we're going, should that come to fruition, operators are really going to need to understand, is there something I can plug in that changes my passive sensors to active, or am I going to have to reinvest in new equipment
system?
And I guess on that note, Pete, it's probably useful for me to hand back to you guys, because there's then some discussion points around that. What is our view on, despite our knowing that it was a progressive system and that it was coming, there's an investment there. TfL are going to ask for an investment again from operators, which could be quite significant. And I think that's an interesting discussion point in terms of and I encourage, the only point I can make here is that we should encourage everybody listening who's an operator who's got a vested interest, participate in the consultation. It's the only way to get your point across.
Absolutely.
So get onto the TfL website and participate in the consultation. You may have views in terms of, should this be applied to new vehicles only, or should I have to refit? There's a question which you might want to talk about in the consultation. it's an interesting topic in terms of
definitely,
the impact. We mustn't diminish the impact on operators.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that I've got a number of thoughts, and again, like I say, not factual, me being speculative. But one question I would ask is if a vehicle is fitted with sensors, whether they're passive or active, it's still down to the driver to decide on the information he's receiving. So the fact that there are sensors fitted, does it make it safer? So I guess the rhetoric question is, does it make it safer if the sensors are picking up only vulnerable road users and not road furniture? Because ultimately the driver's still getting the information either way, that there is something there, whether it's a risk to property, building, or his vehicle, or her vehicle, their vehicle, making sure that I'm sort of gender neutral on that. But yeah, so I guess that's one of the questions. And then one of my other, I suppose, sort of thoughts on it are, operators are looking at a 20 to 25% uplift in the capital cost of new equipment, new vehicles. Certainly in the past sort of 2 years or so since COVID, there's been some heavy increase already. And when you look at a percentage cost of that on, so I don't know, a new Scania tipper is probably something like 150 grand now, and the camera kit for DVS was £1,000, and if that's now £2,000 as a percentage of the overall cost or over the lifetime of that vehicle, it's not a huge expense. But at the same time, I also understand, that comes with a bit of a health warning from me, in that operators are probably feeling that they're a little bit hard done by. When I whether operators are ready for this or not, I in my opinion, I had lots of conversations with operators about DVS at the outset, loads of operations, and in the run up to it, and then everyone kind of achieved the standard, and now it's something they just do as new equipment comes, as new vehicles come, they just add the DVS kit to it. But ultimately, it's kind of dropped off the radar a little bit, in my opinion. So it's going to very much come back on the radar, and obviously, I think the challenge with vehicle operators is that I think they feel. I'm speaking on people's behalf, but I guess I'm only speaking on my experience of speaking to operators on a regular basis. And I think there's an element of feeling a little bit hard done by, in that ultimately London, that there's been a huge amount of people that have benefited from overdeveloping London financially. And London is it's very overdeveloped, overpopulated, and there is a road risk challenge. And I think the standard HGV operator would probably say, why is the burden on us?
On everybody else,
why is the burden on us? And I think there's probably a feeling of hard done by.
I agree. And I think you can see operators rolling their eyes now, saying, "Oh, London again." And at some point, I think there may be some operators who are going to say, "We're just not going to go to London, and we're not going to deliver to London and supply London with what it needs." But I think if you look at it in the round, there's no doubt about it. London, one of the biggest cities in the world, certainly the biggest city in a very important city in the United Kingdom. It does have more clout than everywhere else. Because London is doing it doesn't mean to say lots of other cities would love to do it, but they just don't have that impact that London has. So they take London's lead in many ways. So although TfL, people seem to be, oh, not TfL again. We've had all this before, and but it's not. It's they're kind of leading the way for the rest of the country. I know the road safety, people all over, up and down, local authorities all over the country would love to see their towns and cities reduce the impact on pedestrians and reduce the harm to pedestrians and cyclists, but they just haven't got the clout to do it. So I think by London leading on this, that will, like many things that London does, that will bring on the rest of the country. So
it would absolutely be naive for us to think that this will remain a London only.
Absolutely.
Look at the clean air zones.
Yeah.
So London absolutely first with the low emission zone, then the ultra low emission zone and its expansion. So well ahead, but then subsequently we saw lots of clean air zones all over the country. I think where other cities in the UK, and again I'm speculating here, it's just a view, other cities in the UK in terms of similar to the Direct Vision Standard may we may be helped, operators may be helped, is that there's already existing European legislation being worked upon such that this Direct Vision Standard or its equivalent will end up being something that vehicle manufacturers need to have at the point it rolls off the line. I think that it could be that by the time other cities decide they want to adopt similar safety standards, and we've got to subscribe to the safety standards, so I'll throw that in there all along. Whatever our view is, we've got to subscribe to improving safety standards and reducing deaths and serious injuries. But I think by the time the other cities start to be able to consider that, we might be in the fortunate position whereby the manufacturers are now obliged by legislation to have that sort of standard as it comes off the line.
I suppose also the other confusing thing is, well, you know, if this is happening, why not make it universal by changing construction and use and making it mandatory, rather than, you know, cities and towns having their own sort of little version of it. But so there is, I guess, there's an argument for that. And talking about cost, you know, I mean, I know we you know, when you have to bring it back to its base level, and the cost of having an injury or a collision or a fatality with a cyclist or a pedestrian, you know, that's going to far outweigh the investment. The investment that you're going to take.
I would certainly remind any operators listening, and I know they'll think, oh, well, it's easy for you to say, Pete, but morally, I think every person has a right to be able to walk to work or school or cycle to work or school and not be injured by a vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, everyone has got, you know, ultimately everyone has got that right. And London poses, you know, when we look at risk and management of risk, due to the volume of road users and the density of the population and the density of the road traffic and certainly how busy the roads are there and the building structures and what have you. It poses the biggest, you know, from a risk point of view, the severity is likely to be high, and the frequency at which it's likely to occur is also high. So, you know, using basic risk assessment, it is, you know, right that London lead the way on it, and ultimately we have a moral obligation to keep people safe. Yes. And you know, like you say, I think the cost of impact, and not only financial for the business but also emotionally on the people involved in the business, when something catastrophic does happen, it's going to far outweigh the investment needed to meet whatever standard is decided. And I'm sure the cost of investment will be taken into account as part of the consultation. Anyway, I'm interested. So I had a question whilst you mentioned construction and use. One of my queries on the HGV safety permit is why it's 12-ton vehicles. You know, because for me, a 7.5 ton might be what some people would call a puddle jumper. But you know,
it's a strange, because we work in a heady mix of legislation that's has been written at different times and by different bodies. So we have a right old mishmash, and it's something that candidates on the transport manager courses that we deliver, it's something that they have to get their heads around. You know, legislation is not written, was never written by one person at one time in life. It's written by, you know, some of it goes back donkey's years. Where we are with 12 tonnes, which is an unusual one, because the UK road user levy is 12 tonnes. Lots of things like the Eurovignette and lots of other schemes operated abroad have this 12 tonne, and I honestly can't remember. I know there are available. I can't honestly remember ever seeing a 12-ton vehicle. We normally work with 7.5 tons. That's because we have the licensing implications for driver licensing implications with 7.5 tonners, and we have 18 tonners. You know, we then move up from 7.5 tonner to an 18 tonner.
Yeah, I have come across some 12. We do have the odd 12
some of the
tonners.
Smaller
tippers. They have slightly smaller. They have
slightly
smaller wheel and tyre configuration for the load rating.
It all stems from a kind of a movement several years ago to standardise vehicles. And I think it was originally to do with the European type approval. So we end up with a category, vehicles categorised, M for cars and passenger vehicles, N for goods vehicles, and O for trailers. So the 12-ton comes in as a category N2 vehicle. So anything bigger than 12 tons becomes an N3. So that's why it's capturing the N3 vehicles. So anything over 12 tons is an N3 vehicle. But it does seem a strange. I have no idea why we went to 12 tons, but because it seems an odd number. Maybe on the continent, maybe that's more of a thing for the continent. I don't know, but we don't tend to see many vehicles around that mark. But that's why we've ended up with a lot of these things being the mark is 12 tons. But yeah, getting run over by a 12-ton vehicle or a 7.5-ton vehicle, what would you rather? Not run over by any of them, to be fair.
It's interesting,
yeah.
We've gone back to the N2 and N3 numbers. We didn't discuss this beforehand, but obviously with my time at Volvo, I think this ties in with clocks a little bit because, James, I don't know if
they probably use the same.
I don't know if, James, you've got much experience with clocks or not, but certainly I believe most tippers in the UK are specified as N3G, which means they're off-road specification vehicles.
As well as N3s.
Yeah, and then N3 is the specification of any
over 12 ton.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I believe in London, I probably ought to fact check this, but I believe under clocks, tippers need to be an N3 for clock standard rather than an N3G. And one of the challenges is around the tipper being sort of lower bodied, etc.
Yes.
Because I've had experience where tipper vehicles for off-road use, the N3 standard is a bit tricky for some of the quarries and that kind of thing because the vehicles don't sit as high.
Taller, don't they? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So very, very interesting nonetheless to hear that terminology used again because it's been a little while since I did it, but I've certainly been experienced. So one of my operators had an N3 tipper provided by accident by the vehicle manufacturer, and I looked at it when it arrived and I said, that tipper's N3, not N3G, and they looked at me going, I don't know what you're talking about, and I said, that's not built for off-road, that is an N3 vehicle, and it ends up, the issue you got is when you then use it off-road, it ends up causing issues with all the mud guard system and everything like that.
So that actually ties in, and that definitely ties in with the whole vehicle type approval. So that's where that come from. That's where these that's where those categorisations come from, and it was an objective to standardise it.
Interesting where these conversations go sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, James.
No, let's just it's useful you mentioned tippers and construction vehicles because obviously they are often the vehicles which have the most challenges in terms of direct vision and why it's so important. But just to draw back to the direct vision piece, because I think it's important when we talk about these new requirements in terms of the safe system, we should also remember that they will not necessarily apply to everybody. So I talked at the beginning about the star rating. Now, the current process is that if you're 0 star, then you've got to have a safe system and the signage and the sensors and stuff apply. If you're 1 star and above, if your vehicle is 1 star and above, you don't need a safe system. You can apply for a permit. That will change in 2024. One thing that we do know already is that one of the changes in 2024 in the kind of the stiffening of the standard is that you will need a safe system if you're a 0, 1 or 2 star vehicle. If you're operating 3 star vehicles, those criteria that I spoke about in terms of the safe system and the sensors and things, they're not applicable because you're driving a vehicle which is already deemed to have the right level of direct vision standard. So if you've got vehicles that are 3 star and above, that's great. At this stage, it looks like you'll still need to make a safety permit application, although that's subject to consultation as well. But if you're driving a 0, 1 or 2 star, then that's when you need to start taking notice of those criteria for the safe system.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, James. Thank you for your input. I think we just about tied that one up for the time being. I think it'll be interesting for us to look at it again maybe later in the year as the consultation ends and we start to introduce it. So I think it's something we'll be revisiting. But I hope in the meantime the podcast has been useful information for you and to re-raise awareness that this is going on.
Learned as we've gone along.
James, you got something else to add? Sorry.
As we wrap up, I can't stress it enough, and I think it's really appropriate to say it as we finish off. If you are an operator who's affected, please participate in the consultation. The only way that we can have our voice heard and try and influence the outcome in the way you'd like to see, rather than jumping on Facebook and just complaining about it, is to participate.
100%. Where would people go? Is that on the TfL website?
Absolutely. And I don't know, can we put a link?
Yeah, so I can dig the link out. And if you look in the show notes, I'll do,
we love that,
in the show notes, I'll put the link to the consultation document. in the show notes. So if you're listening to this and you want to participate, we highly recommend you do have your say. Obviously, everyone's opportunity to have their voices heard as part of the consultation. Click on the link and give your feedback. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you very much, James. Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.